So this video is part 2 of hate and extremism. We are in a year of hatred and extremism, and it has gone to the far extreme to where you have like some of the most hateful individuals coming out, and they are extremely emboldened, and they're using every form of hate tactic there is. If it's using the Bible, if it's using weapons, if it's using the Bible as a weapon, if it's using guns, if it's using knives, if it's using hate slur, racism, prejudice, discrimination, you name it, religious, political hate, it's out there. Any hate you can think of, extremism, terrorism, it's in full throttle, and it's on the news, it's online, it's everywhere. And like I did a video where it said there were more than 998 hate groups just online on social media websites. So this one in particular is about Dylan Roof, and recently they said his manifesto of hate was released online. So what recently happened is they're seeking the death penalty for Dylan Roof. If you're not familiar with Dylan Roof, this is a case where 9 African Americans were slaughtered in a church. So I'm looking at the dailymail.com news, and it talks about Dylan Roof. It says he was named Charleston as his target, the church, in the hate-filled manifesto that referred to blacks as being stupid and violent, and detailed his wish for every Jew to turn blue. So there's some website called, excuse if I'm saying it wrong, the last Rhodesian website, or Rhodesian website, seemingly by Dylan Roof, emerged on Saturday. So I believe he posted a host of photographs of him and his rants against black people, predicting the race war. And Roof says that the East Asians could be allies and some South Americans are worth saving. And he said that Jews count as whites, but he wants to destroy the Jewish identity, and he'd wish that he could turn all of them blue to emphasize that they're different than whites, also than the average white, which would be him, I guess, that he's assuming. Also contained a stash of photographs showing him pointing a gun, posing with the Confederate flag, burning the stars and the stripes. And Roof also has been charged with the 9 counts of murder that was in court, and when he was in court on that Friday. Okay, so this was posted June 2015 on the 20th. That's when it was published. And so it's been updated since then. So this is a article from last year, and this is 2016, so it's the end of 2016. But it goes on to say that Charleston killer Dylan Roof apparently left a ranting racist manifesto on the internet calling for a new civil war in America before staging his massacre in the church. A website hosting the document, seemingly written by Roof himself, of 21, not long before the killings at Emmanuel AME Church emerged on Saturday, and said he had no choice but to carry out the massacre on the site. He pinpoints the Charleston, South Carolina as his target, that particular church. And he said the reason being because it had a high proportion of blacks, and he bemoans, or he complains, that there is no real KKK to help him, and he claims that he has no choice but to act alone. So the site also contained a cache of images of Roof burning the American flag, spitting on it, posing next to the Confederate landmarks, and standing menacingly with a gun pointed at the camera. So how many times have we seen on YouTube and other websites, as soon as somebody points guns, they come a-running? But this guy, somehow, he pointed guns and nobody did anything, and he was allowed to do what he carried out to do, and even print out a manifesto and put it online. And nobody took it serious until after the fact. Roof's 2,500 word rant begins with saying he was not raised a racist. How many black people or non-white people have heard that term? I'm not a racist. We know what that means. Really what it means. It's the opposite. Okay, so it goes on to say, but we realized after his own efforts that the drastic action was necessary to stop the U.S. from being taken over by minorities. He also embarks on a bizarre digression on other races, where he goes on to say that East Asians are allies, Hispanics are a huge problem, and that he says he wishes the Jews would turn blue for a day so people would realize they are different to whites. And then he goes on to imply it was written not long before the killings. He declares that the black people are stupid and violent, and he uses the N-word loosely. And then he says black people view everything through a racial lens. And then he goes on, which really it sounds like he does more so. He later continues on to say, anyone who thinks that white and black people look as different as they do on the outside, but are somehow magically the same on the inside, is delusional. So he goes on further to say, how could our faces and skin and hair, body structure all be different, but our brains exactly the same? This is nonsense. We are led to believe Negroes have lower IQs, sick, lower impulse control, and higher testosterone levels in general, and these three things alone are a recipe for violent behavior. So he says. And look what he did. Kills calculatedly, motivated, made a manifesto, plotted to kill 9 innocent African American people and gunned them down in a church. But he then goes on to write that it's the victims who he has been victimizing, or who he's victimized and slaughtered, as being the violent ones, having the violent tendencies. Crazy. So we've heard this before. And at the end of the text he writes, I have no choice. I am not in the position to alone go into the ghetto and fight. So he's too afraid to go in the ghetto and actually really fight people who are fighters. So he goes to a church with 9 innocent black people who are probably grandmothers, mothers, uncles, cousins, pastors, working class people, educated. They're probably not fighters. They're helpers in the community, and he goes and takes their life because of his political and his sick racial views. So I choose Charleston because it is the most historic in my state, and at one time had the highest ratio of blacks to whites in the county, or in the country, in other words. We have no skinheads, no real KKK, and no one doing anything but talking on the internet. Okay? Well, someone has to have the bravery to take it to the real world, and I guess that has to be me. So I'm going to stop right there because it's just really sick. It goes on to talk about where I will mention this, that he was motivated from the Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman case. So here you're seeing the church where the actual massacre took place, in the historical AME church in South Carolina. And you're also seeing, you're going to see clips of Dylan Roof being apprehended by the police. And so I'm going to go on to just start talking about what has recently happened. The manifesto was released online. On most websites you could just pull up his name and I'm sure you'll find it, because I found it like lickety split, and you can read it to its entirety. But it's pretty sick, it's pretty chilling. But he's not the only one that is out there that believes this, unfortunately, because as you scroll down this article, you see all the pictures and you see all of what's going on, and you see that he's going to get the death penalty, is what it was said. They're seeking the death penalty. It's not life imprisonment, it's death penalty. So I'm seeing all these comments that are horrible. They're racist, they're inconsiderate, they're insensitive, They don't have any sympathy or empathy whatsoever. They're non-rational conversations. And I'm assuming that these are skinheads, KKK, people who are just haters of African American or black people in general, people of color and minorities, just all types of hatred. And so it has evolved. It has gotten polarized to the extreme where we are dealing with a year of a rude awakening, that these things have gone on for so long that they have existed to where it is like a cancer, and it has spread and it has evolved. It's like we've got people who hate women, people who hate LGBT people, like the Orlando shooting that happened in Florida. We have people who, don't even look on that website to see the horrible comments that they put, the hatred that they've spewed on there. Just everywhere, people hating black women, people hating black people, hating people for certain religions and certain beliefs, certain opinions, people even hating you if you have a certain political opinion of views. Like if you value one president more than the other, or if you're for or against a president, or if you're whatever your views are. But it's everywhere you wouldn't imagine, and it's all right here in America. And I don't believe that people realized how the severity of all of it was until you see these stories, until you hear, until you learn. People from outside of America, we're not perfect here in America. Some of the problems that you all are having, and people turn around and say, oh, you've got this problem, you got that problem. You wouldn't believe there are so many problems here in America. It is unbelievable. And a lot of it is discrimination, hatred, and racial discrimination, and racism, sexism. Every ism you can think of, it's happening right here in America. And whatever comes from other countries, if that's a certain hatred, it just spills over and comes here, and it's just magnified even more so, and it's just terrible. So this is what hate has produced, and it has just gone awry. It's gotten out of control. It's spun out of control way long ago. And so with this being said, I'm gonna leave it on this note. You got bullying, you got road rage, you got hatred, racism. This is a recipe for disaster. This is all in America. It's terrible.